Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. That SEC basketball schedules came out on Tuesday. I think it's kind of interesting, by the way, week before the season, maybe get a little bit of buzz. You know, listen, I think the SEC does a lot of stuff right. I think they got some stuff wrong with these schedules, but I think they do a lot of stuff right. And I think one thing that they've done right is get this out before football. So guys like me, guys like whoever, John Rothstein, whatever, have a few days to talk about this before football takes over. But I bring it up because the big story in college hoops, we've been wondering, remember, there's only one. When will John Calipari make his return to Kentucky as the head coach at Arkansas? You see Coach Cal at the bottom of the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Well, it became official on Tuesday. John Calipari, the Arkansas Razorbacks, are headed to Rupp Arena on Saturday, February 1st. Plan accordingly. And I'll tell you this, if there is any way for me and producer Matt to be there in the building, the plan is for me and producer Matt to be there in the building because it is going to be crazy. It is going to be insane. And I cannot wait. Couple thoughts on this game. First of all, I'm going to say what we said when it was announced that this team would only play once. The SEC doesn't miss out on much. The SEC doesn't screw up much. I think Greg Sankey's as smart of a guy as we have anywhere in college sports, and they don't miss very many opportunities. They whiffed big time on this one, not allowing Kentucky and Arkansas to play twice. And for people who don't remember the scheduling, there's now 16 teams in the SEC. That's obviously 15 opponents if you include your own favorite school. And the way they're setting up the schedule, at least for the first few years, there are 2 permanent opponents and then one opponent that the SEC can just say, hey, this will be an interesting game. Let's make it happen. So this year, listen, you can't blame the SEC too much because they have Kentucky, Alabama twice. But at the same time, as great as that's going to be, as great as Nate Oates' program is going to be, it is just a colossal failure that these 2 teams are not playing twice. Because listen, bottom line is this will be, in my opinion, the most anticipated game of the entire college basketball season. And it makes zero sense that we're only playing it once. Because think about it like this. Think about if this game was on February 1st and the hype and the excitement and the enthusiasm and the boos and the vitriol and the cheers. And we're going to talk about what I think the reaction will be. But imagine if they were playing 3 weeks later to end the regular season. You think CBS, as they start to ramp up their NCAA tournament coverage in March, wouldn't love to have Coach Cal with that return home game at Bud Walton Arena to end the regular season? Because to me, it's a no-brainer. And don't sell me on maybe the schedules were done. We didn't know Coach Cal was leaving until April. I don't care. This schedule did not get released until today, until August 20th. Figure it the freak out. There is no excuse. You need to figure out a way to play these teams to play twice. What I will say, if I'm going to criticize the SEC for only playing this game once, the timing, I will say, is at least pretty good, okay? Now, the best way to end this, the best way to do this would have been to end the regular season with Coach Cal going back to Rupp. That was maybe not realistic just because of the fact that, do you want 2 teams that have not played each other yet playing on the final day of the regular season? Feels kind of a little bit weird. So I sort of get it. But at the same time, let me at least say this. February 1st is a very important date on the college hoops calendar, and on the sports calendar, really. It is the weekend between the AFC-NFC championship game and the Super Bowl. And so that's going to be the first weekend. So we get football starting August, whatever it is, 26th or whatever week 0 is this week. And we get football in some way, shape, or form every weekend through the final weekend of January. And so that becomes an important date because it will be the first weekend that we will have no football from early August until the end of January, or from late August until late January. And so if the SEC was going to pick a weekend, at least that's the weekend that they picked. At least that's the weekend that makes a little bit of sense from the perspective of it's a place where, it's a dead spot on the calendar, and it's an opportunity for the SEC to have center stage and for college basketball to have center stage as well. So I love the fact that they picked that weekend. I was afraid it was going to be one of these midweek games in January, and listen, I love Carl Ravitch and Jimmy Dykes, but this feels like it should have a national stage, a national profile, a national whatever. Really quickly, a couple other thoughts. One, I am curious, and I'd be curious, people can hop in the comment section if you're watching live on YouTube. I'm curious what the reaction of the fans at Kentucky will be. And we talked about this a little bit in the spring when we knew that this game was going to happen. And we kind of did a poll at that time. But I am curious. And the one thing I will say, I think, and this is going to sound crazy if you get in the YouTube comment section sometimes, I think Kentucky fans, I think everyone's starting to take a deep breath, right? It's like, I think at first it was so emotional. This guy's leaving. How dare he? How's he going to leave us? Screw that guy. We don't need him. And I still think there's a degree of that, which is screw that guy. We're better off with Mark Pope. But what I think is interesting is I think most Kentucky fans have said, you know what? We love Cal. We appreciate what he did. It was time for him to go. And he actually did us a favor by leaving. He could be there next year and we could be miserable and he could be miserable. And we're thankful that he gave us a fresh start because now we get to experience this Mark Pope thing, from the start. And so my hunch is I think it's going to be mostly cheers for Coach Cal, especially when you get to February. Now, the one thing I will say, do think it probably depends on how each team is doing. Like, I think we're going to talk about the teams in a minute, but, I think Kentucky is going to be better than people think. I keep saying I don't understand how people are projecting them as a fringe top 25 team. But if Kentucky's, 16 and 11 or whatever, and that's probably not the right, whatever. If they're, 13 and 10 or whatever they are, then yeah, I think the boos will be a little bit more vicious because fans will be a little bit more mad. Like, why does this team isn't living up to our expectations, especially by the way of Arkansas is good. Now, if Arkansas is 13 and 10, I think most Kentucky fans will be like, thank goodness he's gone and we're happy and Mark Pope's awesome and blah, 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 and this and that. And so I'm curious what the response will be. But lastly, let me go ahead and say this, is that I'm curious for the game itself on the court. Because to me, these are two really good teams. And I know everyone's going to say, oh, Cal doesn't win the games that matter. Well, guess what? I watched him go finish second place in the SEC at Kentucky last year. And I can't say that his first Arkansas roster is more talented. No Reed Shepherd, no Rob Dillingham, no whatever. It's going to be good, though. Got a bunch of guys that are older college players. Got a bunch of guys that are older college players that played for him, Adu Thiero, DJ Wagner, Big Z, etc. So I think this Arkansas team is going to be really good. And the one thing about Coach Cal, his players swear by him. His players fight for him. Arkansas is going to give their best effort. But I also know that Rupp crowd is going to be insane. And like I said a minute ago, I think that Kentucky team is way better than people give them credit for. What is it? 7 fifth-year seniors. 4 guys who averaged double figures last year in power conferences. Kirk Risa, Otega Owe, Jackson Robinson, Andrew Carr. Best three-point shooter in the portal, Kobe Brea. Best perimeter defender, Lamont Butler. Best interior defender, Amari Williams. They just beat the Kentucky TBT team in a closed-door scrimmage. So that game is going to be good. I think Kentucky's going to be better than people realize. But that game is going to be awesome. I cannot wait. And again, I'll be curious if anybody has some thoughts on the game in the comment section below. By the way, I did mention this a minute ago with this. Just did not love how the SEC put together this schedule. Listen, I get Bama, Kentucky is great, but here's another example of like, what are we even doing? Like, what are we even doing in terms of this schedule? Final day of the regular season, Kentucky at Missouri. What is that for a game? Like, what are we doing? By the way, Arkansas, they do open at Tennessee, which is obviously Coach Cal against Tennessee. That will be a very, very, very interesting game. But at the same time, who do they close with? They close with Mississippi State at home. Again, I just feel like the SEC, listen, you got a chance to really make some waves. New league, 16 teams, some intriguing matchups, Cal versus Arkansas or Cal versus Kentucky. Just feel like you completely kind of whiffed on the decision-making process here.